Obviously. We're going to record this, and then just any biofeedback y'all can give me will be very helpful. Looks like we got a pretty busy waiting room here. We got 12 people, so I'm going to start
Oh,
bringing them in. Well, actually, 11. I got your note taker here.
okay. You don't have to bring it in if you don't want to.
Let's see. There we go. All right. I think everybody should be here. Um, well, thank you all for joining Hormone Happy Hour. My name is Justin. I have all of our coaches here. Today, we're going to actually go through some uh, client cases that are a little bit more tricky, just to kind of talk through some of the specifics. So, we have one client who has done some cortisol testing, and we're going to review this and kind of talk through that with one of our coaches. So let me do this first. I'm going to come into a share screen and um, some of the things I wanted to kind of hit on here is, and I'll make sure I'm correct here, Charlotte. So client here is not actually having any issues in the evening as far as like um, cortisol related. That could be anxiety, that could be heart palpitations, blood pressure. It's really just under the reasoning of why is her cortisol elevated so late throughout the day. Is that correct?
Yes. And there is a certain amount of feeling stressed involved too, overall. There's a
And
lot.
questions for you. So when I look at this sample, this individual is a nurse, right? I want to start with that.
Yes.
Okay. So I do see that a lot with nurses. Obviously, it can be stressful and depending on what you're doing. Is she work out in the evening after work, or is it just vary on a day-to-day basis?
Consistently after work.
Okay. And like the thing is, and we've covered this a lot, but your cortisol has a rhythm. Why this green graph is so high and it kind of drops over time. For those who don't know, it's a diurnal pattern with your cortisol. In theory, we should have a pretty robust waking response of cortisol. That's going to get us up out of bed and moving. So she is within range here. She's on the upper cusp of range. It looks like she has a normal slope. So as she comes down into the evening or 2 hours after her waking sample, she's still within range. And then we look at 5 hours, 8 hours, and 12 hours, still really out of range. Um, some things that I would think about is she's training sometimes, maybe 8 hours or 10 hours after work, that elevation and cortisol, kind of reverse engineer this. I think being able to de-stress after training is something I'm a big advocate of. I feel like some people can have that stress response carry over post exercise, and for some individuals that could be low appetite or nausea or just feeling like kind of wired after training. So uh, some lifestyle things I think are helpful to work on is I like a hot shower after I exercise. I feel like that's one of the things that kind of calms my body down, helps regulate my nervous system, especially if I do a leg day. I can vomit after one of those. So I like to kind of get into the shower, focus on my breathing, really try to get myself out of elevations as far as heart rate. I think the other thing is making sure she's eating. It doesn't have to be right after the workout, but within an hour, hour and a half, getting some food in. Training is a stress response. It is going to drive up cortisol. So when appetite is back online, we don't want to force feed anything, but being able to get enough food in to kind of offset that cortisol reduction. So I'm assuming um, this individual's tracking her food, and if I were going to give some suggestions is getting some carbohydrates after our train, obviously some protein, but carbs really seem to help just manage that cortisol response. Other things that I think could probably help, just kind of getting in the weeds here. Um, phosphatidylserine, there is some research that shows it does reduce post-exercise cortisol spike. It's something that I use pretty regularly, specifically after really hard training sessions. So phospholipids help with the mitochondria. They have a lot of other background expression, but the this specific form will actually lower post-exercise cortisol response. So that's something someone could consider. The other thing that we just don't want to, skip on is caffeine consumption. If she's up at 5:30, her first test, making sure she's not redlining on caffeine 6 or 8 hours after work. I know some people will have some coffee or some caffeine, but really being able to limit those things may help with the adrenals if she's not doing that. Um, yeah, I'd say that mineral support. I like adaptogens. I think those things work fine too. So it just depends, Charlotte. Like if 12 hours later she's trying to wind down and go to sleep and she's unable to, there could be herbs put in place there. But to my understanding, sleep is pretty good. It's just more of this excess cortisol production in the evening, correct?
Yep, that's correct. She does take progesterone right before bed, and she said she sleeps through the night. So,
The other interesting thing that I will say is like we're not meant to operate on this really high production of cortisol for a long period of time. It's great for short bursts. We want to think about it from like an evolutionary standpoint. We want surges of cortisol to help us in certain situations, but like that prolonged exposure of elevations to cortisol most definitely can over time create some sort of adrenal dysfunction. Eventually your adrenal glands are going to get lazy and not want to pump out as much cortisol. And what I will tell you, what I would say as a collective, we probably see more low cortisol patterns. I'm sure you see that a lot with clients of where they're not really producing much cortisol throughout the day. And a lot of that could be tied to being in a high stress environment for a prolonged period of time. Um, I think some of the other things I would be concerned with high levels of cortisol is just excess levels of glucose. That could make it hard to lose weight if somebody is, um, if their cortisol is way out of range, potentially glucocorticoid and postprandial glucose, those things could stay elevated longer. Um, so that's something that this client could monitor is fasting glucose, or I'm sorry, postprandial glucose after the training in the gym, and does that decrease over time? And if not, that may be where you want to give some more attention to managing this cortisol pattern. Anything that I missed there, or any additions?
no, I think that was great. I think she's just looking to optimize, obviously seeing it out of range, but then I think it's just understanding, you do most of your workouts in the evening, so that might be, and that's just been a very regimented schedule thing. So I kind of said the same thing you did, like maybe adaptogens in the evening, since she doesn't have any crazy, how do you say, no issues with sleep, so that's good. But I think it's always about optimizing, optimize, optimize. How do we
Yeah,
catch it before it turns into something?
let me see if I can find this. I wanted to see, and I'll drop this in the chat if I can. Bear with me. So let's come in and see if I can share something else. And we'll bump over here. Boom. So this is what I was talking about, the phosphatidylserine. It's a phospholipid supplement, and it can lower cortisol from like 30 to 70%. I think that it really shines after exercise. So for someone who maybe doesn't want to do L-theanine or ashwagandha or doesn't know where to start, phospholipids are probably one of the easiest things that someone could uh, introduce in. And for anybody curious on that, I'm just going to drop that in the meeting group chat, and whoever wants to kind of dig through that can. But this is one of my favorite low-tiered players to use. When I do like a really hard period of dieting, it's something that I like to use after I work out, just because it can be a stressor to train in the gym. You can feel really beat up. I think it shines well for people who have like the exercise intolerance. They may move around a lot and they feel really fatigued after training. Hormones play a role in that. Cortisol plays a role in that. But just getting some extra phospholipid support seems to work really well. So that's something you could have her take a look at.
Awesome. Do you have a specific phospholipid supplement that you like?
I think
Or
the one I really like is called Membrane Support by Quicksilver. I don't remember the full name of it. Do you know what I'm talking about? Let me see if I
Quicksilver?
can find it.
Okay. I think I use the liposomal melatonin and the glutathione from them.
Yeah, yeah, they have a something called it's a membrane support and it has the phosphatidylserine and choline in it. It's one of my favorites. I don't want to divulge too much information, but I'm pretty sure this client's overseas, so I just don't know the accessibility to some of those supplements. But I would assume Pure Encapsulations probably has a pretty good one, and I think that they're like a global shipper, so that's something you could look at.
Okay. You said membrane support?
Yeah, let me
Or
see. Quicksilver Scientifics, Membrane Mend.
okay.
That's
Awesome.
one of my favorites. And it'll give her a bunch of phospholipids. I would start there, and obviously it'll help with bile and brain and cellular integrity. You know, it has a lot of unique benefits to it for sure.
Awesome.
But just
Thank you.
some things to chew on and look at. And I'm happy to go further. If she has some more information we can talk about on another call.
Perfect.
Um, Let me do this. So we have another, and Lisa, I'm gonna need probably some dialogue back and forth with you here.
Yeah.
So let me do this. I actually exported this to a Google Sheet, so our information is anonymous here. So some of the things kind of looking through initial email and kind of messaging back with you too is uh, you seen the biggest reduction you've seen is when you put her in a recovery phase with her nutrition. Is that correct? It seemed like she had dropped some pounds.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm working with a client right now. So I initially had put her, say, moderate calories around like 1600 when we had first began, based on, just some of her tracking and where she was in life. And, we were there for a few weeks, and nothing was budging. So, first thinking we could either go up or we can go down. So I was like, let's cut a little further and see if that makes a difference. And we started to notice that her body weight was going up. So I was like, all right, we got to pull you out of this deficit. This isn't working. And so then I was like, okay, I kind of went into more of a recovery. I gave her more carbohydrates. We went to about like 1800. And she tracked for a little bit, but honestly, I think the tracking itself was kind of frustrating her, and kind of sometimes the process itself becomes a stressor. We don't want it to be, but when there's frustration and whatnot, it can kind of become part of that puzzle. But she was starting to actually like take her foot off the gas a little bit. And, I even said, like, lean into some of your fun foods that you're eating, because she was being really, really diligent with her food quality. So I was like, well, maybe you need a little bit of like, the body probably just needs to like be calm and feel like it's, safe enough to like, let go of fat and whatnot. So I was like, feel free to just add in some few fun things in there as well. And she didn't really track and whatnot, but then she noticed that her weight started to trend downwards. So anyway, we're at the point now where we're still not really tracking, just from that point of view of just the a little bit of that frustration and whatnot. But she was able to hold to that lower weight now, with being on higher calories. So just trying to give her more of like a bigger picture as to what to expect, more of a plan, like a regimented plan in terms of like where do we go from here. And I know we've given you a lot of information yesterday on just some of her history and background, and some supplements she's on, and all of that.
Yeah. Some of the things that I would say is when I see weight reduction after increasing food most likely or reducing stressors, I would probably pursue that. And if she's losing weight there, I think it's kind of hard to quantify if we're not tracking. I understand tracking can be frustrating, or I would almost even go into like, hey, I have these similar meals every day. So I don't have to track, but I'm having similar things, but I would keep the calories higher. I will tell you, I have seen people, and as a coach, it can be frustrating. I'm like, hey, I'm going to jack your food up 300 calories. They're like, no, you're not going to do that. Like, you don't know what you're doing. And then they drop like 5 pounds. I'm like, well, clearly it's not all just calories in, calories out. There's so much that goes into it. So I would continue to try to get my food up to 18, maybe 1900 calories. Find that tipping point. It's like, okay, I'm consistently half a pound or a pound heavier. Okay, that's probably where we need to kind of cap it. And I almost like to live in that environment for a little bit. Um, and then that gives you basically a bigger bank to kind of reduce calories from. So if that's really the drivers, like we're not seeing any change in body composition, I would look at food, and I would just also look at other stressors that are happening there. So if we're um, looking at exercise, I see she's 3 times a week. Is that correct as far as weight training?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and steps, I think those are also stressors. I think a lot of times as people who want to be in good shape and be healthy, we put a lot of stress on ourselves. I got to get my 10,000 steps. I'll not sleep an hour to be able to get those extra steps, and those things can actually become really counterproductive for people. I think that uh, there's clearly some underlying things that are not resolved here of why weight's not moving. 3 times a week may not be that much resistance training to some people, but to some people it could be a lot. So I would take into account, what does exercise burden look like? What does steps look like? Am I giving enough food? And then um, I wanted to hit on sleep. I think that's another thing. I see lots of really good things for sleep hygiene. We have some blue blocking glasses, some multi-spectrum lighting, significantly reduce stress and workload. So I think some of those things are really good. But um, what is sleep like for this client?
Sleep seems pretty good. I don't think it's really an issue. We haven't really, touched on in terms of like any issues there in terms of that. So that seems like it's in a pretty good place. In terms of I just wanted to go backwards a little bit when you were talking about
Mhm.
workouts. We met, I think we met yesterday, and we were talking about how much stress that we're putting on in the gym. Because, even I was talking with the other coaches and we were all kind of, just bouncing around ideas and just saying like, okay, tracking your workouts and just understanding, are we progressive overloading? Are we tracking, sets, reps, weight amount? And all of that. And, obviously there's two different avenues. You can be doing too much, or you can be doing not enough. So just like, I was telling her to share some of that information. So then that way, as coaches, data is so important to just at least see like patterns and trends, to just see like, okay, your weight does this when you do this, or this is the output we're having in terms of the gym, and this is the input that we have in terms of the macros and all of that. So just more in terms of tracking of the food, and then more tracking in the app with the weights and the sets, just so that way I have that data to go on and just I can kind of understand a pattern as to what her body's responding positively and then negatively.
Yeah, I think that sometimes it can be daunting to fill out your workout tracker or put in your steps, but we really can't make assessments if there's not enough of that information. So, um, yeah, I would say just kind of based off personality, I'm sure working out hard. So just understanding what that looks like and making sure we're not overdoing that, and then getting an idea on steps, and then because that can create a really big deficit. I've worked with some clients who maybe 15,000 steps and working out 3 times a week, and they eat 1,300 calories and they're not losing any weight. I'm like, well, there's nothing to pull from. Like you're so in debt here. It's going to take some time to get your body to kind of relax and be willing to lose fat. So, yeah, I think that information will be helpful for you. Um, I think that a lot of things look really good. So I see restriction of caffeine. having it on a full stomach. We're looking at sleep hygiene, light exposure. I think there's two other pieces here just to kind of hit on is if we're looking at some of the things around cycle, that seems to be abnormal as well. So it looks like, um, there's been a period where she had a 48 days cycle. She had a 48-day cycle 2 cycles ago, which is unusual because she's 28 to 32. So she's normally in this average window in which it's starting to extend. She is 45. So I do think that hormones shift quite a bit, and that could be some of it for sure. But I would say I wouldn't make that a focal point because one, you can't really control it if you're perimenopause. So if you're trying to fixate on something you have no control over your ovaries, kind of diving in those other pieces, but this could be something that is playing a role. Um, I think perimenopause is just kind of the continuum of abnormal cycles until you just quit bleeding, which can be really frustrating, I'd imagine. Um, so yeah, I would say looking at that data, tracking cycles would be helpful as well. Um, I see that some of the things she noted. So she noticed on day 8 uh, of the 21-day cycle followed the 48-day cycle. She had improved sleep, improved body battery, reduced anxiety, feeling more emotionally resilient. Um, then on March 4th, dropped weight. Um, so I think looking at her cycle, seeing, maybe trying to track if she is ovulating, she's making a lot of estrogen. Is there any fluxes in weight? Because any lady here on this call knows some months you can retain some fluid and be up some weight, and your cycle can play a role in that. And it can be a little choppy when you're in this perimenopause state.
Yeah, that's a good point. And her and I were chatting even this morning, just c coming into this call. And I was actually looking back at her health history like prior to when she came in, just to kind of understand like what she was coming in with. She had gone through some stressful periods in her life, some personal things had gone on last year, and that's when she noticed her weight had kind of gone up. So she was always like, I want to say she was like 112 pounds. So, on that end. And then she had this really stressful period where then her body weight went up like drastically. And then we were chatting a little bit this morning, and she was saying, like, because I had seen like she did have a history of being on BHRT, even though, she's technically a few years ago, she wasn't probably not in perimenopause. So I was clarifying with her this morning, and she was in BHRT for low progesterone at one point. She had rock bottom testosterone and low DHEA. At the time, she had estrogen dominance, like more higher estrogen, but now her progesterone's in a really good place. Estrogen is more like on the lower point. And my thinking was like, I know perimenopause is it's hormonal chaos. It's like you're up one day, your day depends on even if you test like day 21 of your cycle, it just doesn't matter. You can be in anywhere on that point. So I was thinking maybe she was in perimenopause and that's what was happening. And then that's when she had said her cycles were one was a little bit longer and then shorter. And that really lines up with someone in perimenopause. I know she's working with some other like naturopath and some other doctors, and they were saying that she wasn't. And I know that it's a debatable topic, when are you technically in that phase or not? But I was also thinking like, okay, she was on BHRT. It was a few years ago. Don't know if that would really affect her hormones now, or is it just that natural, season of life of like what's happening with her?
Yeah, I think the progesterone component probably not. I think that if somebody's severely suppressing HPO access with birth control, probably you could see some changes in hormonal fluctuation, especially as someone ages. But probably I would assume, and I'm not going to say for everybody because I see just random stuff all the time, but probably not. I think it could just be the period of where she is right now. Um, if I were trying to give you like tangible things you could hold on and use, I would really pursue like adrenal function for her, stress management, feeding calories up, keeping her there for a period of time. And then when you're ready, pulling those calories and seeing how willing is her body to kind of drop. And there's so many ways to diet, but sometimes I will take somebody from like a higher calorie load and then I'll restrict them pretty severely just for like a week or two, just to say like, hey, is your body willing to drop? I won't keep them at that super low calorie, but if you can come down 2 or 3 pounds really relatively quick, and it's not just fluid, then that kind of tells me, okay, your body's probably more susceptible to fat loss, and then I will start to work down that avenue. Everybody's different. So, refeeding and just kind of keeping an eye on that recovery metric is something I'm a big proponent of.
Yeah.
The last piece I would say is like digestion. So I see a lot of stuff in place to kind of help with that. So I wanted to look and let me see if I can find that. Um, so some gut integrity issues, low acromantia, low elastase, low secretory IgA, high normal calprotectin, normal zonulin. So, yeah, I mean, I would say if we're having lower immunity in the gut, I don't know, Ashley's the GI specialist, but I also think giving enough food, I think that sometimes if we're really low in calories, we may not get enough anti or probiotics, prebiotic fibers. We may not be able to get enough fiber because if we're limited on carbohydrates, you may not be able to get to a high enough fiber threshold to help with that. And I know everybody's different, but just kind of thinking through um, the digestive, uh, it looks like more of an insufficiency and low immunity.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know if you want to provide any more feedback on that, and if Ashley has anything she wants to chime in on that, but I think that that's an area to at least acknowledge.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, with the last few weeks that we kind of, took our, hands off the wheel a little bit with tracking. Yeah, I'm not really sure where the calories are, where the fiber is. So I think, if we get back on track with that, then we can kind of see, are we getting those? I know like when she was eating and when she was tracking, food options were great. Like she was getting enough fiber, she was getting enough, like all her food sources were relatively clean. So I'm pretty confident that, going up in calories, she would probably stick to the same things. I know she was kind of sticking with the same things. I think we just need to have that consistency of the tracking and just seeing that, fiber amounts, et cetera, there.
Yeah. Um, Yeah, I think you know, also just planning ahead for the day. If it's stressful tracking, for me, it can be stressful. Like today, I was in like six back-to-back meetings. So I just last night went ahead and kind of figured out what I was going to eat and have stuff ready because I've had like 5 minutes to eat something today. I had breakfast and then a quick snack. So just kind of preparing for that as well. Um, and she dropped a note in here. I was on 1,600 calories the first 2 months of the program, gaining weight. Nothing, calories have nothing to do with my situation. Yeah, I would say you reduced your stress load by 80%. Your sleep is amazing. Tons of fiber. Yeah, but it's interesting if calories don't have anything to do with it and you're dropping some if you're eating more freely. So I would again stress management, not necessarily as a work reduction, but just like uh, what your body is perceived stress because um, I enjoy doing this, but this is stressful because I've been talking for 6 hours. So my body's going to be pretty wrecked when I'm done after this. So just kind of acknowledging those things um, would be some of the areas that I would think about there. So yeah, I hope that is somewhat helpful. I think it's a puzzle for
Mhm.
sure, and that's why I like doing this is there's so much complexities with each person.
Yeah. No, this was great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, we have some new names here on the call today. Does anybody have any questions? I wanted to open up for a Q&A. This could be anything. So, I mean, if you want to just kind of ask questions, it doesn't have to be on nutrition or cortisol. We talk hormones, GI health, detox, everything on this hormone happy hour. All right. Coaches, do I have anything else? Anything I missed? Anything we need to cover here on our call today?
I think we're good. Yeah.
Okay. Well, if we don't have any questions from any of anybody here joined today, okay. Hold on, I got something in the chat here. What what does the rising HRV and other assumptions indicate? So return of discharge potentially, I would again go back to cycle. So we're dropping more chats on this or questions on this specific case we just looked at. I think that with changes in discharge, stomach softening, potentially around cycle. And Lisa made a good point about this is with perimenopause. Say in perimenopause you have 6 cycles and you don't have half the year you don't. Those 6 cycles that you do track, hypothetically, we get labs on that. Your estradiol and progesterone could be all over. And then the months that where you're not having a cycle, they may be bottomed out. So I would say like if discharge comes back, if that's around the ovulatory phase, you're probably ovulating, and you're probably about to have a surge of progesterone. There's probably some estradiol in the background. To go a little bit deeper, I guess if somebody wanted to gather more information and it doesn't stress you out, you could do ovulatory strips. You could track that and see if you actually do ovulate. But I'm assuming, um, changes in midsection, potentially having some changes in hormonal fluctuation. Excess estrogen could be something that is kind of coming in transit. It could pop up and then kind of come back down in that cycle, and then your next cycle may be different. I think it's really hard to say you're not in perimenopause unless you're going to do a cycle map every day for the next 5 years to figure out if when you are having a cycle and you're not. So, um, yeah, I would say it's probably just some fluctuations in hormones. I know this client has done a Dutch test. If we're just really trying to figure it out, I mean, you could do a cycle mapping test by Precision Analytics. That's every day of your cycle. I know they're rock bottom, but again, you're reading again from the notes here. She just dropped something else. On that specific test, it's going to vary month to month. So if they're rock bottom there, you want to be able to see different months and different periods throughout the year. It's perimenopause is going to fluctuate the hormones. So that would be my best assumption. I wouldn't be able to give you an exact on that, but that's my assumptions with it. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining. It was nice being able to chat with the coaches. We'll go ahead and drop this in our channel and hope everybody has a great rest of their Tuesday.